ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שהכל נהיה בדברו.
לחיים לחיים.
חיים וחיים וברכה. Okay, welcome folks. Let us continue our mimer. So we spoke about the pleasure that Hashem receives, that he longs for our engagement in the darkness of the marketplace, of the public domain, as we called it, of feeling separate from God. Feeling separate from God. That feeling of separateness, that we then take all of that and through our avodah, through our divine service, we transform that, the klipa, into light, revealing God's presence. That gives divine pleasure. It's the concept of laughter, as we explain. So Hashem's ultimate desire, the transformation of darkness into light. So from the following piece of the Talmud says, whoever teaches Torah to an individual of an unlearned person, even if Hashem had made a negative decree, he will nullify it for his sake. In other words, someone who takes the precious out of the disgraced, according to him it shall be. And the Gemara explains, like not a kifi means according, but can be kipi, like the mouth. In other words, that person who teaches the unlearned individual is like the righteous person who has the power to nullify God's decree. Even though that Hashem has made it a decree, God has made a decree, a negative decree that is standing over the person, but by teaching another person Torah, you nullify that decree. That you intervene in God's plan. You intervene in God's plan because he made a decree that this person is going to have a challenge with this. This person is going to be, have problems with health, with finances, with family issues, and so on. And you nullify. Similar story. The similar story is with the Talmud. We told this story already, where Rabbi Eliezer had an opinion that was against the sages. And he said, if I'm right, so then let the river flow backwards, and it did. Let the fig tree be uprooted. Let the walls start of the base ridges start to shake, and all of that happened. And then he said, if I'm right, let even a heavenly voice come and say that I'm right. And a voice came and said, and Rabbi Yeshua stood up and said, Torah is not in heaven. Torah is given to us that we have to use the rule of law in the Torah. And the rule of law in the Torah is the majority rules. What was Eliyahu was asked, what is God doing at that time? He was laughing. Said, my children have defeated me, my children have defeated me. Meaning God made a decree from heaven. And yet he's happy that we overrule him. He's got tremendous pleasure from that. He laughs. So the same thing when it comes to what we're speaking about over here, as we mentioned, the uneducated individual, right, that comes from someone, especially back in the day. Today's, might be a little different, that there's opportunity for anybody. But back in the day, if you came from an uneducated, home, the chance of you getting a Torah education was, it's next to none. So, and that, comes somebody and educates and takes the preciousness out of the, the lowness that there is in Torah. So, in other words, it's like, for those who know anything about addiction is what's the word? A family. It's a generational disease. It's a generational. They call it generational, meaning that if you had a parent that had an addiction, the likelihood of you having an addiction is greater, much greater. It's like, based on genetics, based on experience of what you went through, even though it was terrible what you went through, but that becomes the norm. So, and you see that there's no question that there's a truth to that. To get out of that is not so easy, not so simple. Chaim, right? You're changing the pattern. Change the pattern. That's what we're talking about over here. So God creates a pattern. What's the pattern he creates? In one word, what's the pattern? David, one word.
Addiction.
That's what he creates, addiction?
Creates.
What is God? What's the pattern that God creates? One word. Folks, give me one word. No? Does everybody need a coffee because they're asleep?
Yeah.
L'chaim. L'chaim, l'chaim. Andrew, give me one word. Davida, Liba, give me one word. David, Michael. Huh? Decree? Oh. Connection? That's what God creates, connection? Whoa, you're too holy, Andrew. That's not what he creates. The opposite.
Messiah.
No, that's not what he creates. Klipa. That's one word. Concealment, another word. Right? God creates concealment. He doesn't create connection you got to work on. Every marriage needs to be worked on. Every child that you raise, you got to work at it. How come? Because godliness is concealed. Goodness is concealed. That's what God creates. That's the norm. So the fact that someone falls into addiction or falls into negativity, right? Someone thinks negative. That's the norm. There's concealment. So that's what's going to happen, right? Unless you defeat God. And that's God's greatest pleasure, that you defeat him. That's his greatest pleasure. He created a world where he is not present. He is concealed. This is powerful. Even when a court of law, back in the day when the month was based on testimony of witnesses, and that's what you the based in would declare a new month, even if it was a mistake, purposefully so even. So God says that we're going to abide by the earthly judgment of the based in. So now this gives us greater insight into the unlearned individual who comes from an unlearned, impoverished home, right? Impoverished we mean here of wisdom, not impoverished. Right, of wisdom. So to take out the preciousness, right, out of a dark place, concealed, where because there's no Torah learning in that home, and someone, right, will teach that individual again, conceal, generational addiction, patterns. We all follow patterns. We should when you when we when we're young, we like in our when we're teenagers, we kind of move away from our parents a bit. Why? And when you're young, you're a 3-year-old. So I had my grandson, a 4-year-old, was just here. So like he can't get enough of his father, his mother, like he's an appendage. The 10-year-old has got more, individuality and is not an appendage to the parents. And when they become teenagers, oh, my parents, they're backwards, What do they know, right? Because of course you're influenced by your friends and your surroundings, and they're old fashioned, right? Then you get married and have a family, and you're going to say, "Oh, I'm going to do things differently." Then when you get older, you realize, you're doing things the same because you just become a continuation of them, right? Which can be in a good way, obviously can be also in a negative way. The point being is because of the concealment of godliness, um, you know, real change is, is very challenging. The patterns, just think about ourselves, when you live on, when you do things on autopilot. So, of course, there's not going to be any change. And even though the autopilot could be a very positive autopilot, right? I came here today to teach, you know, and it can be on some level, it's on autopilot. It's just, that's my pattern. L'chaim, l'chaim. In any case, so the pattern will be of the unlearned back in the day, right? To become learned, to have light of Torah, coming out of that darkness, changing that pattern? Very unlikely. So that's how precious it is to God. Tremendous pleasure, like, like laughter. Wow. Because you refine the sparks that were previously concealed, and you revealed the preciousness of this child that came from a place of concealment, and you revealed in them. That's precious. Therefore, Hashem rules, applies the rule that therefore Hashem applies the rule that God makes the decree and the righteous nullifies it, right? For that person. In other words, someone who teaches and spreads Torah to those who don't have a Torah education, they have the power of like the righteous. The person might not be really righteous, but they have that kind of power, right? Why? Why do they have that kind of power that they can nullify a decree? It's because they cause such tremendous pleasure and laughter above that Hashem enables the person to be able to nullify that Hashem gives them the power they can nullify the decree. Wow. That my children have defeated me. My children have defeated me. Wow. Wow. Fine.
Alphabet is enough.
Huh?
Alphabet teaching it.
Yeah, I don't think learning alphabet is taking a person out of that concealment and bringing light. It's a process, right? That person becomes, a learned individual. I think that's what we're talking about. That's the way I understand. Actually, I need a little, you know. Thank you all for being here.
By passing on your learnings, your teachings.
Yeah.
That's it.
To take someone out of the, what greater light is there than the light of Torah? And what greater darkness is there than not having the light of Torah? Right? That's the power we're talking about. Chaim, l'chaim.
Fine.
All right.
Passing on what you're teaching me, somebody else. That's what you're talking about right now. By teaching
Yeah.
somebody what I learned.
Right.